Welcome back to a critical Let's Play of Super Mario 64. Last time I talked about how the game's main tutorial area accommodates multiple learning styles so that players can master the controls at their own pace and gain some familiarity with the physics and types of terrain that Mario can interact with. This time I'm going to elaborate on a pair of crucial aesthetic concepts that are present throughout the game and that help unify the experience of playing it. Those two concepts are realism and sticky friction. Now, realism can be something of a dirty word, I find, and it would be easy to dismiss the idea that there's anything realistic about Mario 64 totally out of hand. I mean, what's realistic about a plumber collecting magic gold coins to defeat an evil dragon turtle and then free a princess in her castle? Well, that may be true, but it really misses the point. Realism isn't a way of reproducing the actual world in all its flawed complexity in a work of art like a video game. To describe realism, I'd like to quote Andrew Hobrecht's description of the concept from his book, Considering Watchmen. In this section, Hobrecht is describing a strong similarity that Alan Moore and Virginia Woolf had in the way that they thought about realism as fiction writers. Moore here shares Woolf's understanding of realism not as faithfulness to external reality, but as the elaboration of conventions designed to give the appearance of such faithfulness. Great novels, Woolf contends, inevitably remind the reader of characters who seem real, by which she does not mean lifelike. Mario 64's concerns with what elements to make realistic, what parts of the game are going to be used to remind players of the real world as a way of adding cohesion and context to their experience of playing it, are of course pretty different than those of comic books or novels. But the overall idea is still here. Many, but not all of the game's sound design decisions strive for realism. Many, but not all, of the textures used on the game's environments look like actual physical materials. But one area that downplays realism, though, is Mario's movement system. Here, the concept of sticky friction takes priority. What is sticky friction, though? Well, sticky friction is a term coined by independent game designer Tim Rogers, who describes the concept as such. Sticky friction, he says, and I quote, is a jaw-dropping, fantastic, insane, meticulous, obsessive attention to detail when it comes to the weight, friction, and existence sense of its characters. It's hard to articulate, so hard to articulate that I don't think I've ever seen a game journalist try, aside from saying the character feels good or the controls are spot on. But it's more than that. It's so much more than that that I had to use a rough English translation, existence sense, of a Japanese phrase, sanzai-kan, usually reserved for describing the presence of a street mime or a classical musician. Maybe you could just translate that phrase as presence and it wouldn't sound so silly. I don't think presence covers it. It's more urgent than presence. It's presence plus a little bit of friction. So sticky friction, in essence, is a particular way that controlling the movement of a video game character can physically feel. This might seem odd given that we know there's no actual physical objects we're interacting with when we play a video game. But here, I think the concept of toys becomes important again. In many ways, a video game character that has sticky friction, a character like Mario in Super Mario 64, is a video game character that feels like a digital action figure. The ways that Mario's moves stop and starts, how he can transition with a fluid but deliberate elegance from some particular movements into others, is very similar to the way that action figures often contain a variety of engineered joints that work together to form a cohesive feeling of what it is to play with that toy. Mario is a digital action figure in a realistic video game world. So with those ideas out of the way, we can finish up the tutorial space by moving forward here and talking about the last abstract and, in many ways, questionably realistic element of the game. As we move towards the castle, the Lakitu brother from earlier comes down and gives us some more text boxes explaining the narrative. Now, earlier in the video series I talked about the fact that there's an inciting incident, and I think, unfortunately, if you read through this text box, again, you don't have to, but if you read through this text box, the inciting incident is somewhat spoiled. If you read through here, At the very end of the second screen, the Lakitu brother mentions that Mario is entering the castle to pursue the missing Power Stars. Now, so far the game itself has said nothing about Power Stars, nothing about them missing, nothing about Mario. There's been nothing about Mario doing anything but to come to the castle to have a cake with the princess. So that's slightly unfortunate, but again, it's not really necessary to read this, so you could let it slide. But I think it's unfortunate that that's there, that there's a slight confusion. I would attribute that to the fact that Mario 64 definitely comes from an era when I think you were supposed to read the game manual cover to cover first before actually beginning to play the game. The game itself was the main feature, but you were supposed to ready yourself for it by reading the manual, and there would of course probably be plot details in the manual that maybe weren't in the game, but here we have an unfortunate, frustrating little in-between. Now as we click through here, we get more information about how to manipulate the camera with the C buttons, which were the buttons we used to manipulate Mario's digital toy head from the very, very beginning. As we click through these and we understand the different things you can do with the camera, one of the things, like I was talking about the sound design being realistic and sometimes not realistic, I don't think there's anything realistic about the sounds that the Lakitu Bros camera can make, but I do think it's very evocative. Something about that sound feels like you're moving to the right or you're moving to the left, you're moving out, you're moving in, you're zooming all the way in. So all of that stuff is really effective. Now, I think the framing device of the idea of a cameraman present to explain exactly what the hell is going on when you press the C buttons and you change the angle at which you're looking at the world and you're looking at Mario is a smart choice. It makes the game definitely feel like, in terms of the narrative, there's more of an event going on because we have an observer. We have someone documenting what you are doing and presumably broadcasting it to people watching on TV or recording it to be broadcast later. It sets up a really nice set of context for what you're doing and helps to draw the whole experience together. Next time, I'm going to talk about how Mario 64 finally introduces its inciting narrative event and how it then encourages players to understand how to progress through the main game.